Hello everyone, welcome. This is a bit of explanation for chapter 4 about the transatlantic slave trade. We stopped the previous chapter with the knowledge and the conclusion that life for indigenous people in the Americas was not very good. The Spanish and the Portuguese oppressed them pretty badly, and there was some kind of slavery, which they didn't call slavery, but in fact it was. And we also saw that the Spanish people did not really behave that well, and many people, indigenous people, died as a consequence of it. That's not the only thing. Yeah, the worst thing that happened in the Americas were diseases. Yeah? Most of all, European diseases. We uh, imported and exported a lot of goods from Europe to the Americas and the other way around. But what we certainly exported from Europe to the Americas were European diseases, plain European diseases like flu and smallpox. You see an image over here, yeah, of an Indian with smallpox. Smallpox and flu is something that Europeans, it made them ill. It made them feel very weak for a few days, fever and so on. You know what it is when you have flu. Yeah, you feel very bad for a few days. You have to rest, but after a week, it gets better and you will survive. But Indians did not survive at all. The American indigenous people died in great numbers from that diseases. To give you an idea, this is a graph of the population of Latin America and the Caribbean from 1500 till the year 2000. If you see in 1500, there were in Latin America and the Caribbean more or less, yeah, than, let's say, 50, 60 million people. If you see how the population evolves, you see that in 1650, barely 150 years later, that number has diminished to, yeah, let's say, what, 20 million people. 20 million people in all of Latin America and the Caribbean. This is double the amount of people that lives in Belgium today. That's all that was left. To give you a better idea, this is a population collapse in Mexico. So we start off around 1520 with about 22 million people. And then in 1520 we have smallpox, which is a typical European disease. Yeah? And that killed about 8 million people in Mexico. Roughly 20 years later, yeah, we have Kokolitsli. Kokolitsli is a name for a disease. Scientists have, for the moment, not really an idea what it was, but they suspect it to be something like the plague. Yeah. It was the local name for it. Yeah. It caused between 12 and 15 million deaths. That illness came back around 1576. So you see the collapse. And by 1600, yeah, that's merely 80 years later, we go from 21, 22 million people to more or less a bit more than 1 million people, which is incredible and causes a large problem, especially for the Spanish and Portuguese, because there's a problem. Yeah? Remember, with the system where all the products from the Americas are being exported from the Americas to Europe, and all the indigenous people, the Americans, doing all the work, if they die in millions, who's going to do all the work? There is a problem, and they have to find a solution for that. We have options for that. Right? We can have workers from America. Yeah, problem. What workers from America? Because they're mostly all dead. First option is that we take workers from Europe. Workers from Europe have issues because, first of all, they are not built for long, hard work, yeah? Especially not in the climate that is present in the Americas. Yeah? It was a very warm, humid climate, and European people are not used to that. Not only to live in, but certainly not to work those long hours in. Second, they won't find workers from Europe that work for free. Yeah? The Indians, the indigenous people, worked for free, and that was part of the deal. Yeah? But nobody in Europe would be so stupid to accept that they have to work for free and in that harsh working conditions. And the prospect of losing profit was a very bad thing for the Spanish. They needed free labor from that. So they thought, yeah, can we get them? Yeah. And somebody hinted that they could get them from Africa. People from Africa are usually quite strong. They are adapted to a very warm climate, yeah? And because the fact they are strong, they can work long hours. But yeah, just kidnapping people and putting them into slavery, isn't that a problem? It is. You should say, yeah, and maybe for the church, it could be for the Catholic Church, because just taking people and putting them into slavery doesn't sound very Christian or Catholic, but the Pope allowed it. According to this source, all the enemies of uh, the religion, of the Catholic religion, mostly they refer to Islamic people, what you see as all Saracens. Those are Islamic people. All Islamic people could be taken and forced into, they say, perpetual slavery. Perpetual meaning there is no end to it. It lasts in eternity. But of course, if they go to Africa and they are not Christian or Catholic, they can assume they are Islamic and as such an enemy of Jesus and God, so they can be put into slavery. Those rights were already given to the Portuguese in 1454, so before Columbus made his crossing, and it was acknowledged in 1593 again by the Pope that this was a possibility. Slavery was nothing new. The Romans had slaves, the Greeks had slaves, and of course the Egyptians had slaves too that built those pyramids. So why would slavery be a bad thing if all the great civilizations in the past had them? And because of that, we get a new system of trade, which we call the triangular trade. A triangle. The triangle goes from Europe to Africa, from Africa to the Americas, and from the Americas back to Europe. They start off. The thing is that all the raw materials, all the goods, the farming products, the silver, the gold, have to be taken to Europe to be sold over there with high profits. So if you can keep labor costs and production costs in the Americas low, you have a lot of profit when you sell them in Europe. Who will do it? Slaves from Africa. They take slaves from Africa to do the cheap work, and all the raw materials go to Europe. Of course, in Africa, they get slaves, but they're not for free. So they make a trade in Africa that they take manufactured goods, finished products. We talk about mainly about weapons. We talk about things of food, of alcohol, or other items that were useful over there. And those were traded for slaves that produced raw materials. They were sold, and with the profit, they made manufactured, rather cheap manufactured goods, which they used to trade for slaves, and so the triangle is complete. This is an example of things that were being processed. We get all kinds of oil, lumber, which is wood, furs, tobacco, silk, rice, and so on. What goes to Africa guns, cloth, which is textile, iron, beer, and so on. Things they didn't have over there. What is the origin of certain things? We are so far advanced in trade that we don't remember which item comes from where. We have prepared a little quiz for you. So if you click on the link, you can find the link in web links on Smart School as well. But if you go to joinmyquiz.com and you enter the code which is on the PowerPoint over here, you do the quiz and then you can see how much you know what the origin is. There are plain products, things that we use almost every day, and to find out if you know where they come from. So you can pause the video here, leave the video, and then come back after you finished the quiz. When you're back, you know how much you know about it, about that system, and it is called the Columbian Exchange. The exchange, going products going one place to another and back, and it is Columbian because of Columbus. After that Columbus arrived, we get an exchange of all kinds of products. You have things going from the Americas to Africa, to Europe, Africa, and Asia, and European, African, and Asian things going to the Americas. And nowadays, things go round and round, and things are even growing here, like corn. Our fields are filled with corn, which is a typical Middle American product. In the United States today, you have states, all states, filled with all kinds of grains, but grains were a typical European thing. And where would we, the Belgians, be if the potatoes for our fries and cacao for our chocolate never got here? We wouldn't have very much of national products, won't we? Yeah, getting the slaves there. It's a very delicate topic, and it's a topic that causes a lot of turmoil, especially up to today, because it has consequences up to today. The transport of slaves from Africa to the Americas was a very brutal way of transporting people. And the ships they were transported in are also called the ships of shame, because nobody has to be proud of what happened over there. And this is for you to find out. So you have an assignment for this. What do you need to do? You read and you study the sources that you find on page 96 up to 71. You also watch the video that I sent you via the link. So if you go to web links, you will find a link to a video. You watch the video first. You can prepare a few questions on page 71. And after that, if you have studied all the sources and watched the video, you do the book widget that you find in the folder under checkup. So again, you can pause the video, you do the assignment, and when you're ready with the assignment, you go back to the video and you fast forward up to this point, and then we continue. Good luck with your assignment. So you know everything about transporting people from the from Africa to the Americas. Now, how many people were transported in total? Um, we don't really know. It are estimates. It are quite wide estimates, but we estimate that between 10 to 15 million people are being taken from Africa and being shipped into the Americas. Most of them went to the Brazil area and the West Indies. And from the West Indies, they were distributed some furthermore. Many of them arrived in the south of the United States today, which were at that time also British and French colonies. Which countries were most active in transatlantic slave trade? Well, that wouldn't be very difficult. Yeah, if you know they came from here and you know how the world was divided according to the Treaty of Tordesillas, you know that Africa was mainly a Portuguese area of operations, then it is no surprise that Portugal shipped most of those slaves to the Americas, but also the UK was very active in it. Don't forget France, the Netherlands, Spain too, and in fact Spain not very much, yeah. But and even Denmark or Baltic states were involved. The slave trade itself, it is not a very short thing. Yeah, so if you see it over here, it starts 1514 and it continues until 1866. We are talking about 300 years of slave trading, which is long. Yeah. In 1866, the country of Belgium already existed for 30 years and it still existed. Although we never, luckily, we never participated in that. Over here too, these are the numbers between 1650 and 1860, and then we forget about the period, we forget to count the period before 1650, which is from 1500, also 150 years. So approximately, again, they talk about 12 and a half, so between 10 and 15 million people. 10 and 15 million people, which is roughly 1.5 times the number of people that lives in Belgium today. You could say, is that a lot? Of course, that's a lot. Yeah, 10 million, more than 10 million people. But maybe you have the idea, oh, what's 10 million people on an entire continent? Well, then you think wrong, because population numbers were very differently in history. So now we are used to giant world population and overpopulation and so on. But in 1500, the number of people living in the world was relatively small. What is of interest to us is the purple line, which is Africa. And if you see Africa around 1500, so if we count it, this is 200 million people. So let's say that this is 100 million people. Let's roughly say this is half. So let's say that 50 to 60 million people lived in Africa, in all of Africa, let's say 500 years ago. If they took 10 to 15 million people away, it means they took 20-25% of the entire population of Africa. They put them on a boat and they sent them back to the Americas. 20-25% of an entire continent is a huge number. How was this to be justified? How can this be allowed that so many people in such horrible conditions were kept and transported? The source that you have also in your course tells most of it. And this is from a British explorer, Richard Burton, and says that the study of the Negro, the Negro being the black people from Africa, is a study of man's as a human, of the human's most basic mind. He says that Africans would rather be a lower form of a civilized person rather than rising up to a civilized, educated person, because they are incapable of doing that. And then you have a fine sentence: there is no rich nature for education to cultivate. These are nice words to say that people from Africa are bluntly too stupid to be educated. So the only thing they can do well is work. They call it the childish race. It's a racial question. He never rises up to a real human level. It's like a chain getting where the links are connected, and the Africans are a link that is already used too much and is ready to snap. There are other reasons for justification too. There is, of course, the economic reason, because slavery provides free labor and is very cost efficient for companies in the Americas. You don't have to pay your workforce, so you have a higher profit. There's a cultural reason, it's a historic reason. The Romans had it, the Egyptians had it, the Greeks had it. They all had slavery, and they were all being talked about. That was their history. They were great nations. So, conclusion, all great nations were built on slavery, so why not for the colonies and the European colonizers? And of course, there's a social / racial reason for that, because Africans still needed to be educated and civilized. It was, yeah, almost a gift to them to teach them how to work and how to behave over there. And it was Europeans thought it would be progress for people in Africa. This is an example of billboards that announced the sale of slaves, where you have over here you have one for 250 fine healthy Negroes arriving from the Windward and the Rice coasts. You see, they say the utmost care has been taken. They wanted to keep them free from the danger of being infected with smallpox. It was in their minds, because they remembered how illnesses and diseases wiped out the entire American population, or almost the entire South American, Middle American population. So they wanted to ease the people that were looking for slaves, that they were not infected. So if you bought one, that you had to be sure that he didn't die within a few days. This is the second one is already in 1800, which is a bit later. They talk about women with their children. So it's not only confined to healthy, strong men. No, it's also women and children that were being sold in families. So entire families were in fact sold. And this image, this painting depicts everything. This image depicts three continents. We have Europe in the middle, we have Africa on the left, we have the Americas on the right. And if you take a look at the three women, remember that continents were female. The middle woman, being Europe, is not standing very stable on her feet. She's weak. And Europe was in fact weak, and Europe only made progress because they were supported by two other continents. You see Africa supporting, holding the hand of Europe, and you see the Americas supporting Europe as well. So we are in fact the ones that made most profit out of it. We took our workforce from one continent and we took all the resources from the other continent. And the combination of those two was to keep Europe alive. So Europe prospered at the expense of the other two. It has consequences up to today, especially for Africa. How can we expect that Africa can be a developed continent if for 300 years we have taken all the healthy, strong men and women away? So what was left? Who was left behind in Africa? Old people weak people, children, they were not able to build up their continent like it had to. And after that, a second wave of colonization came, but and that made it even worse. So who are we to blame Africa that they are not developed yet? More about consequences for or consequences from that slave trade in the next lesson.